The quaint town of Brookfield had always been a picture of serene suburban life. Nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, the town was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other's names and neighbors often greeted each other with friendly waves. It was here, in a modest but cozy two-story house, that Olivia and her daughter Sophia lived. From the outside, their lives appeared idyllic, but within the walls of their home, a storm was brewing, a storm that had been gathering strength for years. Olivia Thompson was a woman who had spent her life wearing many hats: a devoted wife, a nurturing mother, and a dedicated school teacher. Born and raised in Brookfield, Olivia, now 42 years old, had always been the kind of person others looked up to. Her parents, both educators, had instilled in her a strong sense of responsibility and a deep commitment to helping others. From a young age, Olivia knew she wanted to follow in her parents' footsteps and become a teacher. After graduating with honors from a prestigious university, she returned to her hometown and began teaching English at the local high school. It was in Brookfield that Olivia met John, a charming and kind-hearted man who worked as an architect. They quickly fell in love and married within a year. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and deep affection, and they were overjoyed when Sophia was born 2 years into their marriage. For Olivia, life was perfect: a loving husband, a fulfilling career, and a beautiful daughter who brought light into her world. However, tragedy struck when Sophia was just 7 years old. John was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer, and despite fighting bravely, he passed away a year later. His death left a void in Olivia's life that she never fully recovered from. She was suddenly a single mother, forced to navigate the challenges of raising a child alone while grappling with her own grief. Determined to provide the best possible life for Sophia, Olivia threw herself into her work and her role as a mother. She became even more diligent in her teaching, earning a reputation as one of the most respected educators in Brookfield. At home, she tried to fill the gap left by John's absence by being both mother and father to Sophia. But the loss of her husband left Olivia emotionally guarded. The fear of losing someone else she loved deeply made her overprotective and, at times, overbearing with Sophia. As Sophia grew older, this protective nature began to clash with her daughter's growing desire for independence, creating the first cracks in their relationship. Sophia was a bright and spirited girl, much like her mother had been at her age. With her father's striking blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, she was often described as beautiful, but there was more to Sophia than just her appearance. She was intelligent, creative, and full of potential. As a child, she had been close to her mother, sharing a bond that Olivia cherished deeply. They would spend hours together reading books, baking cookies, or exploring the woods near their home. Sophia had inherited her mother's love of literature, often losing herself in the pages of a novel or writing short stories in her journal. However, the loss of her father had a profound impact on Sophia. At such a young age, she struggled to understand why her father had been taken from her and why her life had changed so drastically. Olivia had done her best to shield Sophia from the harsh realities of the world, but in doing so, she had inadvertently created a barrier between them. Sophia was left to grapple with her grief on her own, and as she entered her teenage years, that unresolved pain began to manifest in ways that neither she nor Olivia could have predicted. By the time she turned 17, Sophia had become a typical teenager, in many ways rebellious, moody, and eager to assert her independence. However, her rebellion was fueled not just by the usual adolescent desire to break free from parental control, but also by a deep-seated frustration with the life she felt had been unfairly thrust upon her. She resented the fact that her mother treated her like a child, setting strict rules and constantly worrying about her every move. Sophia longed for freedom, for the chance to make her own decisions and live her own life. But Olivia's overprotectiveness only intensified as Sophia grew older, leading to a vicious cycle of conflict and resentment. Sophia's behavior began to change dramatically. She started hanging out with a new group of friends, many of whom were older and had little regard for rules or authority. They introduced Sophia to a world of parties, late-night outings, and a carefree attitude that was intoxicating to her. For the first time, Sophia felt like she was in control of her life, like she was finally breaking free from the confines of her mother's expectations. But this newfound sense of freedom came at a cost. Her relationship with Olivia began to deteriorate rapidly. The chapter opens on a chilly autumn evening in Brookfield. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of red and orange, and the town was preparing for the upcoming fall festival. But inside the Thompson household, there was no sense of celebration. Olivia had just returned home from a long day at school, her mind still occupied with thoughts of her students and the upcoming parent-teacher conferences. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and all she wanted was a quiet evening with Sophia. However, as soon as Olivia walked through the door, she knew something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet, and there was no sign of Sophia. This wasn't the first time Sophia had stayed out late without telling her mother, but each time it happened, it filled Olivia with a sense of dread. She tried to push the worry aside, convincing herself that Sophia was just at a friend's house and would be home soon. But as the minutes turned into hours, Olivia's anxiety grew. Finally, around midnight, Sophia walked through the door, her eyes slightly glazed over and her hair disheveled. Olivia, who had been pacing the living room, immediately confronted her daughter. The conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument, with Olivia demanding to know where Sophia had been and why she hadn't answered her phone. Sophia, feeling cornered and angry, lashed out at her mother, accusing her of being overbearing and controlling. "You're suffocating me," Sophia shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm not a little kid anymore. You can't control every aspect of my life." Olivia, hurt by her daughter's words, tried to explain that she was only concerned for Sophia's safety, but Sophia wasn't in the mood to listen. The argument continued to escalate, with both mother and daughter saying things they would later regret. Olivia, desperate to regain control, threatened to ground Sophia, taking away her phone and forbidding her from seeing her friends. But instead of backing down, Sophia only grew more defiant. "You can't keep me locked up forever," Mom Sophia retorted, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm almost an adult, and I can make my own decisions." The argument ended with Sophia storming off to her room, slamming the door behind her. Olivia was left standing in the living room, her heart pounding in her chest and tears welling up in her eyes. She felt a deep sense of failure, as though she was losing the most important person in her life. She wanted to follow Sophia, to try and make things right, but she was too exhausted, too emotionally drained. Instead, she sank down onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. The following days were tense and filled with an uneasy silence. Olivia and Sophia barely spoke to each other, their interactions reduced to brief, tense exchanges. Olivia's attempts to reach out to Sophia were met with cold indifference or outright hostility. She could see that her daughter was slipping further and further away from her, but she didn't know how to stop it. Sophia, for her part, was struggling with a mix of emotions. On one hand, she felt a sense of exhilaration at having stood up to her mother, but on the other hand, she was consumed by guilt. Deep down, she knew that her mother only wanted what was best for her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia was trying to control every aspect of her life. The conflict between her desire for independence and her love for her mother left Sophia feeling confused and conflicted. The tension in the house reached its peak one evening when Olivia discovered that Sophia had skipped school to spend the day with her friends. Furious, Olivia confronted her daughter as soon as she walked through the door. The argument that followed was even more intense than the last, with both mother and daughter shouting at each other, their voices echoing through the house. "You're throwing your life away," Sophia Olivia shouted, her voice filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "I'm trying to protect you, to make sure you have a future, but you're making it impossible." Sophia, feeling more trapped than ever, lashed out once again. "I'm not your little project, Mom. You can't control everything I do. You don't understand me, and you never will." The argument ended with Sophia storming out of the house, leaving Olivia standing alone once again, her heart heavy with a sense of impending doom. Everything. After yet another argument, Sophia decided that she had had enough. Feeling suffocated and misunderstood, she packed a bag and prepared to leave the house. Olivia, sensing that something was wrong, tried to stop her. The days following the explosive argument between Olivia and Sophia were filled with a tense and unsettling quiet. The two of them navigated their shared space like strangers, both unwilling and unable to bridge the growing chasm between them. The air in the house was thick with unspoken words and unresolved anger, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Olivia was tormented by the realization that her relationship with Sophia was crumbling, yet every attempt to mend it seemed to push her daughter further away. Meanwhile, Sophia, fueled by a combination of teenage rebellion and a deep-seated sense of injustice, began to act out in increasingly dangerous ways, as if daring her mother to react. After the argument, Sophia's behavior took a turn for the worse. She stopped coming home on time, often staying out until the early hours of the morning. When she did come home, she was distant and cold, refusing to engage in any conversation with Olivia. The once bright and eager girl, who had loved spending time with her mother, had been replaced by a sullen, rebellious teenager who seemed intent on pushing every boundary that Olivia set. Sophia's new group of friends played a significant role in her transformation. They were older, more experienced, and lived lives free from the constraints that Sophia felt so suffocated by. These were the kinds of kids who skipped school regularly, drank at parties, and had little respect for authority. To Sophia, they represented the freedom she so desperately craved, and she quickly fell under their influence. One of Sophia's closest new friends was a girl named Kayla, who was a year older and had already dropped out of school. Kayla was the embodiment of everything Olivia feared: reckless, wild, and completely unconcerned with the future. She introduced Sophia to a world of late-night parties, casual drinking, and a rebellious attitude that Sophia found intoxicating. With Kayla, Sophia felt a sense of belonging that she no longer felt at home. Olivia noticed the changes in Sophia almost immediately. Her grades, which had once been stellar, began to slip. Teachers at the high school called Olivia to report that Sophia had been skipping classes, failing to turn in assignments, and showing a general lack of interest in her studies. This news was devastating to Olivia, who had always placed a high value on education. She tried to confront Sophia about her behavior, but her daughter either brushed her off or responded with hostility. The more Olivia tried to tighten her grip, the more Sophia resisted. It was as if they were locked in a battle of wills, with neither willing to back down. Olivia implemented stricter rules, such as curfews and restrictions on who Sophia could see, but these measures only pushed Sophia further away. The once close mother-daughter bond had disintegrated into a constant power struggle, with neither side willing to compromise. The turning point came one Friday evening, a few weeks after the initial argument. Olivia had been dreading the weekend, knowing that it meant Sophia would likely be out with her friends, ignoring curfew, and leaving her to spend another sleepless night worrying. She had tried to reach out to Sophia earlier in the day, suggesting that they spend the evening together watching a movie or going out for dinner, but Sophia had barely acknowledged her suggestion before leaving the house. That evening, Olivia sat alone in the living room, her heart heavy with worry. It was nearly midnight, and there was still no sign of Sophia. Olivia had called her multiple times, but each call had gone unanswered, only adding to her growing sense of dread. She knew that she couldn't continue living like this, constantly on edge, worrying about her daughter's safety and well-being. But she also knew that any attempt to confront Sophia would likely end in another argument, further widening the rift between them. As the clock ticked closer to 1 a.m., Olivia heard the sound of the front door creaking open. She quickly got up from the couch and made her way to the hallway, where she found Sophia quietly slipping inside. The sight of her daughter, looking disheveled and reeking of alcohol, caused Olivia's heart to sink. This wasn't the first time Sophia had come home in this state, but each time it happened, it felt like a fresh wound. "Sophia," Olivia said, her voice a mixture of concern and frustration. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." Sophia rolled her eyes, clearly not in the mood for a lecture. "I was with friends, Mom. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Olivia insisted, trying to keep her voice calm. "You're underage, and you shouldn't be drinking. And what about your curfew? We agreed that you'd be home by 11. Sophia scoffed. "Agreed? More like you decided for me. I'm not a child, Mom. I can take care of myself." Olivia felt her patience slipping. "You're 17, Sophia. You're still my responsibility, and as long as you live under my roof, you'll follow my rules." "That's the problem," Sophia shot back, her eyes flashing with anger. "This house feels like a prison. You're always watching me, always trying to control me. I can't breathe with you constantly hovering over me." Olivia was taken aback by the intensity of Sophia's words. She knew her daughter was unhappy, but she hadn't realized just how deep the resentment had grown. "I'm not trying to control you, Sophia. I'm trying to protect you. You're making choices that could ruin your life. You're so much better than this." Sophia's expression hardened. "You don't know anything about my life. You're so wrapped up in your own world that you don't even see me. All you care about is what you want from me, not what I want." The argument escalated from there, with both mother and daughter raising their voices, each trying to make the other understand their perspective. But it was clear that neither was truly listening. The tension that had been building for weeks, months, even years, erupted in a flurry of accusations, hurtful words, and tears. Finally, in a moment of raw emotion, Sophia screamed, "I hate you," before turning on her heel and storming out of the house. Olivia was left standing in the hallway, her body trembling as the weight of Sophia's words hit her like a physical blow. The door slammed shut behind Sophia, and Olivia was plunged into silence, the only sound the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. She wanted to chase after her daughter, to pull her back and make things right, but she was paralyzed by the realization that she didn't know how. As Sophia stormed away from the house, she was overwhelmed with a mix of anger, frustration, and a deep sense of despair. She couldn't understand why her mother couldn't just let her live her life. Why did everything have to be such a battle? Why couldn't Olivia see that she was suffocating her, pushing her further away with every new rule, every new restriction? Sophia walked aimlessly through the quiet streets of Brookfield, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't go back home, not tonight, not after what she had said. Instead, she decided to go to Kayla's house. Kayla's parents were rarely home, and Sophia knew she could crash there without any questions. When she arrived at Kayla's, the party was in full swing. The small, rundown house was filled with people, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke. Music blared from the speakers, and people were scattered around talking, laughing, and drinking. It was a scene that had become all too familiar to Sophia over the past few months. Kayla greeted her with a knowing smile and handed her a drink without asking any questions. Sophia was grateful for the silence, for the temporary escape from the chaos of her life. She downed the drink quickly, hoping to numb the emotions that were swirling inside her. As the night went on, she drank more, losing herself in the haze of alcohol and the carefree atmosphere of the party. But no matter how much she drank, the pain wouldn't go away. The image of her mother, standing in the hallway, looking so hurt and lost, kept flashing in her mind. And every time she thought about the words she had screamed, "I hate you," a wave of guilt washed over her. She didn't hate her mother. She hated the situation, the constant fighting, the feeling of being trapped. But she didn't hate Olivia. Yet, in that moment of anger, she had said the words, and there was no taking them back. Back at home, Olivia was in turmoil. She couldn't stop replaying the argument in her mind, analyzing every word, every reaction. How had they come to this point? How had their relationship, once so close, deteriorated into this mess of anger and resentment? Olivia blamed herself for not handling things better, for not finding a way to reach Sophia before it was too late. As the hours passed and Sophia didn't return, Olivia's worry turned to panic. She knew that Sophia was out there, somewhere, vulnerable and alone. The fear that something terrible could happen to her daughter gripped Olivia's heart, and she realized that she couldn't just sit at home and wait. She had to find Sophia, to bring her home and make things right. The final chapter of the tragic tale of Olivia and Sophia began with a sense of inevitable dread, the kind that settles deep in the bones and refuses to let go. The tension that had been building for so long was about to reach its devastating climax, with neither mother nor daughter fully aware of just how far they had been pushed until it was too late. Their story, once filled with love and connection, had become a nightmarish spiral of misunderstanding, rebellion, and desperation. And as the night wore on, it became clear that neither of them would emerge unscathed. After Olivia left the house, she drove through the quiet, dark streets of Brookfield, her mind racing with fear and regret. The cold night air pressed in around her, adding to the sense of isolation and panic that gripped her heart. She knew she had made mistakes, that she had let her emotions dictate her actions too often in recent months, but she was determined to find Sophia and make things right. No matter what it took, she needed to bring her daughter home, to mend the wounds that had torn them apart. As she drove, Olivia's thoughts kept returning to the last words Sophia had shouted at her before storming out. The declaration of hate, so filled with venom, echoed in her mind, but Olivia refused to believe that those words represented the truth of their relationship. She knew that deep down, Sophia didn't really hate her. Sophia was angry, yes, angry at the world, angry at the situation, and most of all, angry at her for trying to control her life. But Olivia was convinced that they could work through it, that they could find their way back to the closeness they once shared. Olivia's first stop was Kayla's house, a place she had come to associate with all of Sophia's recent troubles. The small, dilapidated home was a stark contrast to the carefully maintained houses in their own neighborhood. It was a place that Olivia had always tried to keep Sophia away from, knowing the influence Kayla and her friends had on her daughter. But tonight Olivia was willing to set aside her reservations. If Sophia was there, she would go inside and drag her out if she had to. All that mattered was getting her daughter back. When Olivia arrived, the house was still alive with the sounds of a party in full swing. The windows were lit with a dim, flickering light, and the muffled thump of bass-heavy music could be heard even from the driveway. Olivia parked her car and hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of anxiety at the thought of walking into the chaotic environment she knew awaited her. But her love for Sophia overpowered her fear, and she steeled herself as she approached the front door. As Olivia knocked, she could hear voices and laughter from inside. The door opened after a moment, revealing a disheveled, bleary-eyed Kayla. The girl's surprise at seeing Olivia quickly turned to a mix of disdain and defensiveness. "What do you want?" Kayla slurred, leaning against the doorframe for support. "I'm looking for Sophia," Olivia said, her voice firm but tinged with desperation. "Is she here?" Kayla rolled her eyes and shrugged. "Yeah, she's here, but she doesn't want to see you, lady. She's had enough of your crap." Olivia felt a surge of anger at Kayla's dismissive tone, but she pushed it down. "I'm taking her home. Now." Without waiting for an invitation, Olivia stepped past Kayla and into the house. The scene inside was exactly what she had feared. A group of teenagers, many of them clearly intoxicated, lounged around in various states of inebriation. Empty bottles and cans littered the floor, and the air was thick with the smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke. Olivia scanned the room, her eyes searching for Sophia. She found her daughter in the back of the room, sitting on a worn-out couch with a drink in her hand, her expression vacant and distant. The sight of Sophia like this, so far from the vibrant, passionate girl she had once been, broke Olivia's heart. But there was no time for tears or recriminations. Olivia marched across the room and stood in front of Sophia, blocking her view of the party around them. "Sophia," Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly, "we're going home. Right now." Sophia looked up at her mother, her eyes glassy from the alcohol. For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition, of the girl who still loved her mother somewhere deep inside. But it was quickly replaced by the mask of defiance that had become all too familiar. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Sophia muttered, turning her gaze away. Olivia's patience snapped. She grabbed the drink from Sophia's hand and slammed it down on the table, causing some of the liquid to spill over the edge. "Enough, Sophia. You're coming home, and we're going to talk about this, like it or not." Sophia pushed herself up from the couch, swaying slightly as she stood. "I don't have to do anything you say," she hissed. "You don't control me, Mom. You never did." The tension in the room was palpable, with the other partygoers watching the confrontation in uncomfortable silence. Olivia could feel her resolve weakening, but she knew she couldn't back down. "I'm not leaving here without you, Sophia." For a moment it seemed like Sophia might give in, that she might follow Olivia out of the house and into the night. But then Kayla, who had been watching the scene unfold, stepped forward. "Sophia, you don't have to go with her. Stay here with us. We're your friends, not her." Sophia hesitated, torn between the two worlds that had come crashing together. On one side was her mother, the person who had always been there for her, even if their relationship was now fraught with tension and pain. On the other side were her friends, the people who represented the freedom and escape she so desperately wanted. In that moment, the pull of rebellion won out. "Leave me alone," Mom, Sophia said coldly. "I'm staying." Olivia felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. She stood there, unable to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. But the sight of Kayla smirking triumphantly at her daughter's side filled her with a new wave of determination. She wasn't going to lose Sophia, not to Kayla, not to anyone. "Fine," Olivia said, her voice laced with an edge of finality. "If you're staying here, then I'm staying too." Without another word, Olivia sat down in an empty chair across the room, folding her arms across her chest. The room fell silent as the other partygoers exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia stared at her mother in disbelief, unable to process what was happening. "What are you doing?" Sophia demanded. "I'm not leaving without you," Olivia replied calmly. "So if you want to stay here all night, then I'll stay too. We'll sit here together." Sophia felt a surge of anger, but there was also a part of her that was impressed by her mother's resolve. Still, she wasn't ready to give in. "Suit yourself," she muttered, turning away. The tension in the room remained thick as the party continued, albeit at a lower volume and energy than before. No one knew what to make of the situation, and the once lively atmosphere became awkward and strained. As the hours passed, the partygoers began to drift away, leaving Sophia, Kayla, and Olivia in the dimly lit living room. Eventually, even Kayla got bored and retreated to her room, leaving Sophia and Olivia alone. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things they wanted to say but couldn't. Olivia watched Sophia from across the room, her heart aching for the little girl she had raised, the daughter she had lost to anger and misunderstanding. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Sophia sighed and stood up. She was exhausted emotionally, mentally, and physically. The fight had drained her, and all she wanted now was to crawl into her bed and sleep. "Let's go," she said quietly, not meeting her mother's eyes. Olivia didn't hesitate. She stood up and followed Sophia out of the house, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and trepidation. They walked in silence to the car, and as they drove home, neither of them spoke. But there was a sense of hope in the air, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, they could start to heal. The quiet drive home felt like a brief respite from the turmoil that had consumed their lives for so long. Olivia glanced at Sophia occasionally, noting the weariness etched into her daughter's face. Sophia stared out the window, her expression unreadable, but the defiance that had been so strong earlier seemed to have faded. The silence between them was heavy, but for the first time in months, it wasn't filled with anger. It was almost peaceful. When they arrived home, Sophia went straight to her room without a word. Olivia watched her go, feeling a pang of sadness at the continued distance between them, but she knew pushing for more right now would only backfire. She decided to give Sophia some space, hoping that the night's events had planted the seeds for a reconciliation. Olivia spent the morning in a haze of exhaustion and worry. She tried to distract herself with chores, but her mind kept drifting back to Sophia. What could she do to reach her? How could she repair the damage that had been done? Every time she thought of a solution, it seemed inadequate, too little too late. By the afternoon, Olivia could no longer bear the tension. She needed to talk to Sophia, to try to break through the wall that had been built between them. Gathering her courage, she knocked on Sophia's door, waiting for a response that didn't come. "Sophia, can we talk?" Olivia asked softly, pressing her ear to the door. There was a long pause before she heard the faint sound of movement inside. Finally, the door creaked open a few inches, and Olivia could see Sophia's tired eyes peering out at her. "What do you want?" Mom Sophia's voice was subdued, lacking the venom that had characterized their earlier interactions. "I just want to talk," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice gentle. "Can I come in?" Sophia hesitated but then nodded slightly, stepping back to let her mother enter. Olivia walked into the room, her eyes taking in the familiar surroundings. Sophia's room was a mess, clothes strewn about, empty soda cans on the desk, and the bed unmade. But Olivia wasn't here to criticize. She sat down on the edge of the bed, leaving space for Sophia to join her. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, neither knowing how to start the conversation. Olivia could feel the tension in the air, but she also sensed that Sophia was waiting for her to speak first. "I'm sorry," Olivia finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry for everything, for the way I've been, for the things I've said. I know I've been too hard on you, and I've made you feel like I'm not on your side. But I am, Sophia. I've always been on your side. I didn't know how to show it." Sophia didn't respond immediately. She stared down at her hands, which were fidgeting nervously in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry too, Mom. I know I've been awful, and I've said things I didn't mean. But I felt like you were trying to control everything, like you didn't trust me to make my own decisions." Olivia felt a surge of emotion at Sophia's words. "I wasn't trying to control you, sweetheart. I was just scared. Scared of losing you, scared of you making mistakes that could hurt you. But I realize now that I can't protect you from everything. I need to trust you more, to let you find your own way.